Well, good morning and good afternoon, members of the Cybersecurity Collaborative and guests. I'm Tom Skura, a Vice President of Content and Programs for the Collaborative. I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar titled ISO 2701-2002 Certification, What You Need to Know. A few housekeeping things. This presentation is available to members. It'll be in our member portal next week. And for guests at the end, there's a way you can get it. There's an email you can write to Tom Ward, and we'll send you a copy of this presentation, which is packed as usual with a lot of information. So bear with us as we get through this. The other thing is any questions that you have, please put in the Q&A box. I will certainly do my best to answer these. Give some time to the end. Any question you have about ISO certification. There will also be a poll question at the end. Hopefully you'll find some value out of this presentation. And one of the questions will be, if you're interested in joining the Cybersecurity Collaborative's effort to work together on getting ISO 27001-2002 certification in the context of a collaborative forum. So I'll talk more about that as well. My guest, Jody Barnes, came down today with a horrible flu or something and regrets being here. And Jody has been a longstanding member of the collaborative. His company is great in contributing a lot of stuff. So I'm sorry he's not here, but he did participate in the development of this presentation. And I am not acting here as a host, but as someone who is very familiar with the standard and will share my experiences. I've helped companies get through this. In fact, when I was at Verizon, I helped the Verizon Information Processing Services group, which was their whole operations IT group, become ISO 9000 certified. And there were a lot of similarities between ISO 9000 and 2700, with the exception, of course, 27001 is as a security standard. But the principles of management and how you do it and of continuous improvement have continued on. So for those who are not familiar at all with the standard, you'll become familiar with what's required out of this. That's my intent. For those that have 2013 and are looking to go into 2022, which is a new standard, and I'll talk about the differences. I'll go over the differences with you and some of the new controls. And for all of you, I'm going to share my experience. I've worked with different certification auditors or registration auditors, and have helped companies go through and actually get their certifications. So I'll give you some tips on what the auditors are looking for. And part of the issue is, if you look at the standard, it could seem daunting, especially the guidance. And I'll give you some ideas about what companies are looking for in regard to that. So just a moment to talk about the Cybersecurity Collaborative. If you're not familiar with it, we are a non-vendor organized or related organization of CISOs and staffs of CISOs that get together in a number of communication forums to share our concerns, best practices, templates to try to help us all improve our security postures. And there are a number of benefits that members have to being here. One is certainly we have a huge library of CISO developed tools and resources. These are guidance documents. We have a metrics template. We have a boardroom guidance document. We have an AI document. So it's a library to help CISOs and their staff gain new ideas and some tools to actually use to help improve various aspects of their programs. We have what we call task force working groups, and one that we're going to organize here, we're looking forward to next year, is an ISO 27001-2002 working group, where we all work together to become certified over a 6-month period. So we'll go through all the steps that need to be done. We'll provide the tools and templates. And again, at the end, you'll get a poll question. If you're interested in joining, let us know. Also for CISOs and staffs, we provide a daily morning security report. Comes out at 6:30 a.m. in the morning. So a CISO will never get blindsided walking in and being asked what happened to a breach in this company and how are we responding to similar concerns. the CISO will already know that this is happening and can work with his or her staff to address certain controls that might affect them in terms of a related breach. There's peer-to-peer direct messaging in Slack, and we have a CISO Ask Yes rapid response. Next year, we're also going to have rotating task forces every month. So the beginning of the month will be called the CISO Power Hour. So CISOs come and talk about any subjects they want to do. We're going to have the next week, we'll talk about AI concerns. We've already had a task force on this. The third week, we'll talk about security metrics. We've had 2 task forces on this and a continuing desire for members to improve their programs. And then the last week, we'll have Tech Talk, again, getting vulnerability management teams together to address how they're remediating certain vulnerabilities and actually dig into the processes of doing that. So the topics we'll talk today about are the value and perspectives. There's a lot of value to this, but I want to share some perspectives on this, particularly if you're evaluating companies that say are ISO certified and your third-party programs are relying on that certification. Just some caveats around that. We'll talk about the basics for obtaining and maintaining certification. We'll then talk about the new standard, which is 2022 versus 2013. Took them almost 10 years to come up with a new standard. What's in it? What's different? Preparation steps for the full audit. How would you go about preparing for this? And then we'll provide some key guidance. We'll have Q&A at the end. Its value goes without saying. It's an internationally recognized security standard. Obviously, many organizations are certified to PCI DSS, but that can be limited to your payment card industry scope. This relates to whatever scope. It's more the business scope and environment you apply it to. It's independently validated through annual audits by an ISO certified registrar. So you are going to go through annual audits. I'll explain some of them are more intense than others as we go through. It's based on the concept of continuous improvement. Okay, so that's an ISO caveat that comes out of the quality area back in the 1980s and 1990s. And that is, let's try to continuously improve what we're doing. So they see the philosophy of security can be continuously improved. It may make the difference between you and a competitor being hired if you are providing a service to a customer, whether it's a physical product or something, you may be asked, or you're handling sensitive information. They may look at you versus someone else and say, what kind of security certifications do you have? And the typical ones that they look at are a SOC 2 Type 2 report, which is an audit report by a CPA firm based on the controls that you suitably define, and they validate that they're operating effectively, or the ISO standard that you have as well. Some perspectives. If you think that going through here is a perfunctory process because you've got a good security program, think again. It doesn't change your controls and the way you operate it, but it changes the way you manage and report on these things. So I've had some potential clients that have said, well, are they really going to dig into stuff? And the answer is yes. All auditors will look at what they need to audit, but their approaches are very different. And I'll kind of get into that a little bit as we talk about it. Having a registration does not guarantee a sufficient level of security, okay? So one thing, if someone gives you an ISO certification and you make assumptions that they're patching critical patches ASAP, let's say, you don't make those assumptions. In fact, technically, you can write out all the control. You won't get away with doing it, but there are 2 parts to the standard. There's the management processes, which you have to do, and the controls, which you can select based upon your risk appetite and so forth. If you exclude them, however, the auditor is going to want good evidence to do it, and they might fight you on it. So technically, you could exclude doing third-party risk management, vulnerability management, security awareness. I wouldn't do it. The only things that you really have to do, you have to do a risk assessment every year. You have to have policies, and there have to be management processes in place. So the point is, if you're looking at someone having this, chances are they have a vulnerability management program and stuff like that. But unless you look at their statement of applicability, you won't know. And that's just a caveat. It's not all about documentation, but you are required to have documentation, and you can over document. One thing I did in ISO 9000 way back at the turn of the century is we over documented everything because we concerned that the auditor would say you don't have documents. It's not so much here. We've been in a situation where we didn't have good documentation, but we had good practices and records showing we did things. And they might recommend a document as an opportunity for improvement, but they wouldn't gig you for it as much. So they kind of backed off a little bit, in my experience, on that basis. And then minor non-conformities are not an indication of poor security. So I'll discuss. There are major and minor non-conformities to your information security management system. Sometimes people, again, in the evaluate, when they're looking at someone with this, they say, well, they had 5 minor nonconformities or 10 nonconformities. They must not be very good. Why one nonconformity that one of my clients got was the fact that they reviewed major documentation every year, but they didn't review some less important documentation every year, as they said they would do. So that was a minor nonconformity. Does that mean they have bad security controls? No. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those nonconformities because everyone gets a little upset with it. And there is a cost. There's a certification registration cost, and there are surveillance audits that occur as well. The standard itself, first of all, if you're interested in ISO certification, you got to buy it. It's $200 or so, maybe it's $250. You got to buy the international standard and also the guidance document with it. Now, don't be overwhelmed. The guidance document goes into tremendous amounts of detail. You're not required to do all of that. It is just that. It's there to tell you about how to interpret the controls and what you might want to do. When you're designing these controls, it's got to be what's effective for your organization. You can always argue that, and any auditor that I talk to will accept that. So ISO 27001:2013 is being sunsetted. It's valid through October 31, 2025. You can certify it, from what we understand, I guess, up until April next year. Don't even bother. I mean, then you're going to have to, in the next year, turn around and go to the new standard, okay? The new standard is enforced now. And as I mentioned, there are 2 sections to it. The management clauses, section 4 through 10, and then called the Annex A controls. And as I said before, 2002 provides guidance on implementing it. Just keep in mind, what you are establishing is called an information security management system. They call it a system, and you're continuously improving the system. We always think of security in terms of controls, but they consist of management practices and the operation of security controls. 2 key components. Keep those in mind. So let's talk a little bit. Let's move on and talk about the certification process, basics for obtaining and maintaining. You are going to do annual audits by a certified registrar. Typical costs are between 10 and 20 annually. Less for the first one, it can be less than that, depending. I've taught organizations that are 10 people, only 10 people, and others are billion-dollar corporations. So it really depends a little bit on the size of your organization, complexity. But what's going to happen is every 3 years, and for the first time, you're going to have the auditor go in. They're going to look at all management clauses 4 through 10, and they're going to look at all Annex A controls. Actually, I've got this reversed. It's really probably 5 days or so that you're gonna take for that. Sorry about reversing those. Let me just say too, technically they do more of a sampling of these things. Clauses 4 through 10, they'll go through them in detail, but the Annex A controls, they will do more of a sampling. Some auditors will ask for all the documentation on all controls beforehand, and then sample only parts of it in terms of discussing it with you and getting in more detail. Others will sample everything over interviews and stuff like that. So it really depends on the auditor. Years 2 and 3, it is only a sampling, and they tell you what they're going to do prior to coming in. They give you an audit plan, a schedule, and say, here's what we're going to be talking about. So they do give you a chance really to prepare for it, especially for the surveillance audits. So first year you have a major one, 2 and 3 is the surveillance audit, and then you have to repeat. You go through another certification audit. The other point I want to make is you have to have some internal audit capability established, whether it's people on staff or you have a contracted third party, but they're not the people that are operating your controls. It's not the person doing a security awareness presentation that's doing the internal audit of the security awareness presentation that it's done and who attended or what. It's someone else. It is obviously a separation of duties. You need to put an audit plan together, and you need to put a report together, and you need to look at it in terms of major, minor nonconformities, opportunities for improvement. That's one of the things that I think dissuades people from this, is because now I have to spend time and staff to do this, or I have to contract by a third party. What we're looking to do at the collaborative, if you're interested in having us help you out, is, and it's a concept right now, is if we all work together, you can each audit each other. We're all under NDA, but one could provide an audit function to another without necessarily engaging an independent third party or contracting staff specifically for that purpose. So it does provide a little bit of a cost advantage in the way we're approaching this. I did talk about this again. Some auditors love to give out nonconformities, and others are afraid to do it because they'll just give out opportunities for improvement because they don't want to upset anyone. Because oftentimes, and erroneously, people are seeing a nonconformity as a lack of doing work or a lack of failing to do something. And it comes down to an individual. And that was my occurrence in the early years of this. It was, you were put on the wall of shame if the nonconformity was with you or within your organization. Auditors don't want to give you nonconformities. They want you to be certified to this. They can stop an audit in the middle of it because they feel that you're not cooperating, or or your management is not involved in the audit, or you don't have anything. They can certainly do it. I have to say, no one wants to do that. They want you to be certified for reasons of it's business, obviously, but they believe in the value of this from a security standpoint. They're passionate about it. So it's not something that you're not going to be able to do. But you have to accept the idea of nonconformities and opportunities for improvement. And you have to kind of tell your management that these are things that are going to happen. So major nonconformity, I'll tell you an example. I had one company that was audited by one firm, never had a major nonconformity, only opportunities for improvement. And then they switched to another firm for whatever reason. Then they had a major nonconformity, and they had to kind of deal with it. So auditors are not consistent, unfortunately, in that area. But a major means it's something like I didn't do a management review. I've said I do security awareness presentations, but I didn't do it this year. A minor might be I do security awareness presentations, but not everyone took it. I didn't follow up on something. An opportunity improvement is anything that the auditor says, might be a good thing to do. So, as I said, one auditor really treated a minor nonconformity as an OFI. Others really looked at it as something else. So what happens is, if you go through an initial audit, you get a major, it's going to take you, you have to do two things to it. You have to correct it, and then you have to remediate the root cause of the problem. Okay, so a correction is, I'll give you an example of one that happened to me. So we got a minor nonconformity because documentation was not reviewed annually. The policy said we will review all documentation for efficacy and validity annually. Okay, We did that with incident response, we did it with business continuity, we did it with the major security policies. We didn't do it for some of the processes. We didn't do it for the risk assessment processes. We didn't do it for the audit process. Okay. So the corrective action is fix it for the audit process, fix it for the risk assessment process. That's the correction. That was easy to do. We just did a review and did it. The remediation is we have to have a full list of everything and make sure every year we have a checklist that we've done it. Okay. And for a minor, they're not going to wait to look at that until a year from now. For a major, they're going to look at it. You got to get it done by 60 days. So let's say you didn't do management reviews of your system, which we can talk a little bit about that. You're going to have to show that you're doing management reviews in 60 days. So let's say you were certified, and you did them when you were certified, and then let's say a year later you stopped doing them and you got a major. You have to give yourself 60 days, otherwise you'll lose your certification. Then then there's a gap between when you get the next one. It's a little complicated, but and I'll explain in the guidance, you've got to give yourself some time as you go forward. So let me just go through the two sections in the 2701 2022 standard. There are clauses 4 through 10. And these are the management clauses. And again, you're going to get a copy of this presentation. You got to understand the context of the organization, interested parties, third parties, the scope. The scope is physically what you're doing from IT, the locations, etc. Leadership and commitment. Is management committed to it? Do you have policy and you define organizational roles, responsibilities, and authorities? Most of you do, having security programs. Then a big part of it is addressing risks. You need to have a standard of some kind, a risk assessment standard, and then you need to have risk assessments done every year. That's absolutely paramount and essential, and they'll look at that. And then information security objectives and planning to achieve them. This one we've danced around. An objective might be, I want to reduce my risk points by X% over a year, or I want to improve my security awareness participation by X amount over a year. They like you to track it and show some metrics around it. I've seen some of the auditors really dig into this, and others kind of dance around it as long as you have some defined and you're working on it. They want to make sure you have enough support. You have documented information, and it's controlled. As I mentioned, the control means you have a version number and you have a date on it, and you have it approved. Okay, all your documents have to have a set control area. Then there's doing the planning, control, and security risk assessments. Performance evaluation is really the management review. Internal audit, as I mentioned, you have to have an internal audit program. And then you have a review periodically program. And the review can be of these things, or it can be looking at an information security plan and making progress against a plan which has all your risks and vulnerabilities as you're trying to address. And they want to see continuous improvement, and that you have in any non-conformities and corrective actions that have come out of your audit program. So that's the way they want to operate and manage, and it takes a bit of getting used to. You can bring this into your normal management processes, but you have to document it. You have to do these things, which is a little different. To the right is Annex A controls. This is just a sample I've put down. There are 93 in the new standard. Used to be 116. You can see policies for information security, roles and responsibilities, segregation of duties, contact with authorities, special interest groups, being with a threat intelligence. Actually, being a member of the collaborative is a special interest group, but you probably have other ones as well. And threat intelligence, strategically, you get the morning security report. So some of these things can be met here, but not only through the collaborative, just kind of doing a little plug in that regard. Let me move on then to the next steps here. So the clauses that I showed you from 2013 to 2022 are basically the same. In fact, I don't think there's a single difference. The audits say they've been slightly modified, but I haven't seen anything. So certainly nothing new in it. So if you've been doing that, continue to do that. The Annex A controls is, again, as I mentioned, there are two pieces. They're new control families. They call them organizational, people, physical, technological. You've seen these organizational structures before. 2013 reduced the number of controls from 114 to 2022. There are 93 controls. And here are the new controls. They want to make sure that you have threat intelligence, strategic and tactical. So are you looking to see what threats in general are going after your organization? Are you bringing threat intelligence into your SIM, for example, would satisfy that. And let me, when I get done here, I'll just remind, well, actually, I should say it right now. So one of the things they will ask you about is they'll want to see, again, a list. They'll say, well, how are you addressing the new controls? One way to do this is literally just call them out, have management meetings around it, take the guidance from 2000, the 27002 guidance, put it in with a control description, and then have a discussion about how are we meeting it and what do we need to do. Because that's what the first thing they'll ask you is, well, how are you addressing new controls? So go through that exercise, and then from there, if you have some gaps, you can put them on your plan to achieve the gaps. Let me just say also, you're never going to have all these things perfectly in place, and that's not a problem, for gaining registration. So what I'll do is, if we haven't got something, if the control is immature, the first thing I'll do is I'll show that it's documented. I'll show that we're doing something on it, and I'll show something in a plan to say this is how we're improving it. And that way, we don't usually get a minor. We might get an OFA or not. So don't think till I get all these things and everything's running hunky-dory, I can't go for certification. You'll never achieve it with that attitude. So coming back to it, make sure you work in your teams to go through and say, do a gap analysis on these things. So physical security monitoring, they want continuous monitoring. But you might have a data center and you have 7x24 monitoring, and they're not going to ask for continuous monitoring of your home if you're in home offices. That doesn't happen. And in the audit, they do a physical security walkthrough, but they didn't really press this one in the auditor that I used. Monitoring activities, network systems, application monitoring for anomalous behavior. Again, intrusion detection systems, I'll be looking at that. Prevention systems. If you have EDR systems in with ransomware, that's a good thing to put in. Configuration management. If you're in the cloud, you should do configuration reviews and stuff like that. They're going to ask for that. In fact, you should do them anyway from a security standpoint. There are reviews you can do. There are some tools now where you can do continuous monitoring for configuration drift. That is a major potential vulnerability in this area and something that's important to do. Another one, now they've come up with information deletion and stuff here. Information now, making sure it's deleted when no longer required. Make sure you have a data retention deletion policy of some kind. You're showing you're doing it. So if you have customers and they left and your agreement is 90 days after leave, you delete this data, make sure you're doing it. Just show that you're doing it. Data masking, PCI talks about this as well, limiting exposure of sensitive data when you can. Maybe there isn't a capability or need to do it, or a practicality of doing it. Okay, but again, limiting the exposure, maybe there are other ways of doing it, using fake data or something like that. Data leakage protection. Again, if you're using M365 tagging features, as an example, that's a good way to show that you're managing these things. There's a lot to do that, but companies now beginning to use that as a feature. Web filtering, they like to see access to external websites to reduce exposure to malicious content. For client, we didn't do a lot of that. We did mention that we're looking into more Microsoft kinds of things. They didn't press us on it. Again, security awareness, make sure you have something in security awareness to say, well, this is how we're handling it, and we're looking at doing this. And you'll probably okay, but you could be looking at some of the, again, if you're in Microsoft, some of their features for doing that. Secure coding, it's been in there before, but reducing the number of vulnerabilities in code. You want to show that you have a secure coding standing or security process. If you're using GitLab or GitHub, you can file, actually they'll look at that, and you can follow the process of approvals and management, and also that you're showing that you're doing some vulnerability scanning using Veracode or whatever you might do on that point. Information security use of cloud services. So what they want to do here is understand a little bit more about your processes for acquisition, use, management, and exit from cloud services. One thing you might want to do in these controls that you're putting in the statement of applicability, which is a list of the Annex A controls, is define your responsibilities versus the cloud service provider's responsibilities, because that shows that you're looking at this. But obviously, they want to know, what's the exit strategy? Let's say you're in a small cloud service provider. When you leave, what's going to happen to your data? Are they going to give you time to leave? Are there things like that? So, again, configuration management also is something in that. ICT is the information communications technology readiness for business continuity, making sure that the communications are working for backups and your business continuity plan. Really, I found with the auditor, we just showed that we did a business continuity test, a tabletop, and how we would address any communication issues. Some people working at home would be using their ISPs versus the company's ISP, and they were satisfied with that. They're kind of getting into these controls right now in terms of understanding them and the depth of them. But to recap best practice, go through all, look at the guidance, decide what you have, put something down that you have, put something in your policies to say that you're doing it. Okay, at least you've got that. And then show what you're doing it and put something in your plan to improve it. And that's kind of the way to approach all these subjects and topics so far. Let me just go through some of the key documentation that you're going to need. You're going to need information security policies. You all have them. If you have them and you don't have a control sheet that has a version number and a date and approval, and you want to do this, you better put it in. It's not hard to do, but you should have a process of doing that. Having an organization chart, I would kind of also add to this, having I would call it a network diagram, but a kind of a systems diagram of how you use cloud and so forth is also extremely important, because it gives the auditor some context about your organization, and it helps the auditor and you understand a little bit more what to do. So that needs to be built. A risk assessment there needs to be a risk assessment standard. Actually, we have a standard that you can use for ISO 27001. It's based on ISO 27005. If you join here, you can use that standard and modify it to what you want. What they want to do with risk assessment is what assets, what threats, what vulnerabilities, what likelihood, what impact, and risk score. Auditors are all different about this. They don't go into your specific methodology unless you want to show it to them. I made the mistake of doing that, and then they were saying the math was wrong and this, and which wasn't, but it could be. I could see where it could be misinterpreted. So you can do it as simple as having key assets, some threats, some vulnerabilities, do a high, medium, low likelihood, a high, medium, low impact, and come up with a high, medium, low risk score. Or you can use risk points, and we have a method of doing that. Or you could do it the best way possible and use the FAIR methodology and come up with dollars. All the auditors like that, but it's a little more time-consuming, expensive, but it does have a lot of value. They do ask you to compare it from year to year. So if you're coming up with a point or a bottom line score, you show some of that. They don't, I've gotten away without doing that for many audits, but as you mature, they ask for that more and more. And it can be a tool for determining controls applicability. They're saying decide what controls are applicable based upon your risk assessment, but I kind of say which ones are you doing and important first and back it into it. And the control maturity is important because it determines your level of risks. A scope statement is, we actually have a scope statement template. It's really the context of the organization. It's what scope is ISO apply to, the description of your information security management system, reliance on third parties, external needs for doing this. It could be that you're being asked by your clients to get certified, and you put that in there. Statement of applicability. I've seen clients do that for the management controls and Annex A. With management controls, I just show them examples and put it together. But for Annex, because statement of applicability, Annex A controls are all, the management clauses are all required. The Annex A controls, you got to list if they're applicable or not, and if not applicable, state a reason and include a control owner. And again, if you're in a cloud environment, what's the responsibility? The cloud is doing the patching. I'm not, or I'm doing the patching in an IaaS environment. This is where, you have to say it's applicable or not. Now they say give a reason for applicability. I haven't put reasons for that, but if you say no to something, why is it not applicable? So the ones that are typically not applicable are outsourcing code. If you outsource code, it is, of course. Or maybe you don't have, I guess there's one about transporting media, in a bay or something in a building. That may not be applicable. You don't store any media, so it's not. And you have to describe why it's not applicable. Then you describe your system, which really is a separate document, or you can actually put it in your policy. And it's really saying it's a series of policies and controls, and actually we have guidance for that in the collaborative, looking on how to put that together. The information security objectives, again, come up with a few of them to start. Again, it may be just improving our risk posture. It may be getting all organizations, applications, and infrastructure under change control, or maybe getting them into an asset management system. Again, come up with 2 or 3 of them and try to measure them. All right. Management review is basically, you have to go through and review. Typically, I would review every week progress on a plan for small companies. Obviously, for bigger companies, when you have a management meeting with the CISO and so forth, you will talk about performance in the different areas here, and if there are issues and what we're doing. You're going to have to document the review in terms of what you talked about and what actions are taken. Okay, it could be very short documentation. You don't have to go crazy, but that may be something new that you're used to. Internal audit plan and procedures. You're definitely going to have to. We have actually an internal audit procedure you can use, and it has a form for non-conformities and audit plans, that sort of thing. And the information security plans, again, you may have them already in terms of poems and other things. Rely on what you currently have. You don't have to create new things here. Obviously, a statement of applicability you're going to have to create. A risk assessment, if you got a process, no. Policies, no, you've got them. What I like to do with the policies is sometimes reference a particular ISO control within the policies. And when it comes to the auditor, they can see, okay, yes, they've said this is something that needs to be done. But that's entirely up to you. It is not necessarily a requirement. Key records, these are recommended. They like to see, again, okay, this is what we say we're going to do, but this is what we're doing. So a document change log, incident tickets, change management records, incident response tests, business continuity tests, user awareness training records. It's not like a SOC 2, which says if you missed one person, you get a little gig. They want to see, obviously, annually who signed up for this, and they'll want to see a list of those who were there, but they're not going to check to make sure everyone was on the list. Vulnerability scans or remediation show that you're doing that. Penetration tests or remediations. Asset inventory. They do ask about that. They ask about an asset inventory of some kind. And use what you already have if you have a CMDB, but that's something that I've been asked about quite a bit. Access provisioning and deprovisioning records. They want to see, they'll ask typically, all right, I want to make sure that that there are people no longer in the organization who left, and they're going to see if you still have them there, because of the security risks. Third-party risk evaluations. You're not going to get away with excluding that as a control unless you say in the company, I'm never going to use a third party. But if you're using Microsoft or Azure or Google, you're using a third party. Actually, we have, again, some risk evaluation standard and also some tools here, including a little workbook that has worked in the ISO certification process. So again, they're going to want to see that you're doing it. They might want to look at the contracts and et cetera. They see it as a huge risk area, and it is a risk area. Management review meeting notes. They don't read everything about it. They want to see it happens. And information security plan updates. If you have a plan, and the plan is, how you're improving the control, basically. Okay. And it could be whatever, if you use project plans or whatever you're using, POAMs, you can continue to use those. No need to go on it. So how to get started. Okay. So you're thinking about doing this. Hopefully you still are after all this. Give yourself enough time, 9 to 12 months. I can see it be done to 6 to 9, 3 months kind of thing, because you got to operate this thing and put it together. So make sure you get enough lead time to get to the audit. This, let's say 9 months, and then you do the audit. Maybe you're fine. Maybe you've got a major non-conformity and you got a couple more months you got to add to it. So I like to give yourself 9 to 12 months. Ensure InfoSec has a designated leader. If you don't have a CISO or you have a director, that doesn't matter. But the one thing they like to do is to see management in the audit, at least for the first day, on the management clauses piece and their commitment to this. So I would say, don't put a junior person on the audit. Management doesn't want anything to do with it. It just kind of looks like, well, they're not really, it's nice that they're doing it, but management isn't sincere. They want to make sure the organization is committed to this. So, but you need to have a designated leader, and probably you do. Establish a working team of security and IT professionals to do this. Have someone, put together. If you're working collaboratively with us, you can have a representative, and you have other collaborative folks here helping you complete the required documentation and processes. Establish or leverage an internal audit function. If you have an internal audit function already somewhere, see if you can somehow leverage that, or someone with internal audit experience. Report to an executive steering committee, again, just to say, here's how we're managing everything. Consider a pre-audit with a registrar. So you can go to a registrar, and some of them do pre-audits to really do the gap analysis for you. I will have to say, sometimes it's a different staff doing the pre-audits versus the ones doing the audit. They want the separation of duties and everything else, as we know. And sometimes in a pre-audit and the audit, there's a difference in interpretation. So don't expect, if you get through the pre-audit, that you're going to pass the other audit. And pass, I use loosely because you will, but you might have some issues with it. You just really have to, it's good if you're not working with a team and some structured consultant or some organization that tells you, so with experience, that tells you what you really need to do. Not a bad idea. You're going to pay 9, 10 grand or whatever, maybe more, depending on your organization, to go through and do it. But it's not a bad idea. So, all right, what do I do? Here's what I would do as recommended progression steps. And this is kind of the approach we'll take in the collaborative is, and we do have templates, and we're putting templates together for doing this. Is one, start with the scope statement. Put your organization chart, systems diagram. What's the context of the organization in terms of the business and the system and how this fits into things. That kind of gives you a better idea of how this is going to fit. By the way, there's a poll question coming up because it's quarter to the hour. The Question 3, we're not 100% certain we're going to offer it. It will be depending upon interest, but of course, if members internally want to do it, we shall do it. If you're interested in participating in a preparation services offering, and just to describe that, again, we'll provide the templates. We're going to pace it while working together as a team to complete these items. So the good news is it's going to be paced, in terms of the groups. In between the sessions, we can provide some help to get you there in preparation for it. And we're looking to kick that off in January or early February. So if you're interested, we'd like to know. So in terms of the progression, we'll start with the scope statement. We'll then do a gap analysis. Okay, so what's in place and what isn't in place in terms of your management clauses and Annex A control. And as I said, there'll be a separate review and notes for the new controls so that you can demonstrate that you've addressed them. And then what we'll do on that is we'll update policies, create a statement of applicability, and update your plan or create a plan for improving or addressing the gaps. There's kind of a back arrows into it. We'll then do a risk assessment because the risk assessment is going to identify other things that you want to improve in your plan. Maybe there'll be some policy adjustments, et cetera, and maybe some adjustments to the statement of applicability. And then we'll institute a management review process with ISMS objectives, a plan, a review agenda, and schedule. And you can do that internally, but we'll show you how to do it. You don't have to do it in the group, but we'll show you what needs to be done. And then you'll operate the controls, for a period of time. You've probably been operating them anyway, but certainly if you haven't had some records with them or you weren't doing it, you want to do it based upon the gap analysis and what you're doing with the plan. And then after that point, we'll suggest doing an internal audit so we've had a chance to operate it. Now let's do an internal audit and see if there's anything else we need to worry about. And then again, that feeds back into the information security plan. And then you've got everything ready to go for the external audit, which would be done after that. So making sure I have enough time to go through this when you get to a Q&A. A couple key things to remember. It's not as prescriptive as PCI DSS. Okay. It doesn't say you're going to do annual pen tests or 90-day. It does have a thing about managing technical vulnerabilities. Pen tests are a good thing to do. We hope you do them. It doesn't say anything about 90-day access reviews. It wants you to address it, but it doesn't have specific things on it. So if you have another standard that requires you to do it, then I would just pull it over into this one. Make sure your audits are within at least 30 days of your registration renewal. I would say 60 days to be safe. So when you're renewing, give yourself plenty of time. Don't overly document. Do only what you need to do and what you will use. Okay, so don't go heavy on that. Give yourself enough time to prepare. 6 months to set up, 3 months to operate. I actually said 6 to 9 or 9 to 12 would be in the outside of that. One of the things you want to do is to set this up with management to say, look, this is a continuous improvement objective. We're doing this because it adds value to the business. Companies want to make sure we have a credible program. It enhances our security posture. But you've got to educate them on the fact that there will be non-conformities issued. It's not a weakness in your security program. It's a improvement opportunity in your information security management system. And again, some auditors are very aware of that. And oftentimes, if management is like, no, we'll talk to the auditors and they'll try to work with the management to help you out. They understand it. They, as I said, they want you to be audited. So, all right, just a couple of things and let me answer some questions. So we're doing a SEC regulations task force right now. If you have 10K filings, you got to come and join us because we've got good guidance on what to write. Operational technology kickoff. I mentioned also we're doing some rotational task forces. The one on the right is really talking about the preparation services. I'm looking at 2 sessions, 6 to 9 months. We're all under NDA. We support each other, templates provided, questions addressed in between sessions. We could use members to help doing internal audit needs. It is a paid for service. If you're a member now with a certain level, it's free. Others, it will be a subscription service, and we'll discuss what that is at some point. But right now, we're gauging interest. If you join, I just want to point out, and you will have this presentation. We have a lot of content that's useful in a number of areas right away that can help your security program. I'm going to leave this up. Please send a note to Tom Ward at cyberriskalliance.com if you want a copy of this presentation. I hope you will take a CPE for spending your time here today. Q&A sessions. Okay, let's see the best I can do. What size of the company benefits from size? It doesn't matter. I have a company I'm working with right now, it's 10 people. Okay, what you have to do, however, is just make sure that you're scoping it and managing it in a way that's not overly cumbersome. So if you're working with a consultant, don't load up with a lot of things. You always want to tailor to make sure that it's providing good security value to you. And who's ever working with you to do it, make sure whatever's being done is going to add some value. I mean, there's some things about the management reviews you got to write up that aren't, but in terms of benefits, I mean, if the certification is it's got to benefit you in terms of it's maintaining a security program for you. It's a good way to enforce discipline in the organization, number one. Number two, to the outside world, it's going to benefit you either for increased business or stature or whatever it might be. So look at it that way. I got to thank you. That's nice to have. I appreciate it. What have you heard about evidence for NIST compliance in ISO 3422? Does the organization that have NIST also NIS2, NIS2, and welcome, Malahide from Ireland. Thank you for being here. I don't know about that. I wish I did. Plans or let me check into it. I want to write a note. You stumped the band on there. If I'll come to Ireland and I'll work it out with you. I'd love to visit that beautiful country. So they won't send me over except on my own dime. But so I'd have to check on that. Thank you. Apologies. Can you comment on SOC 2 versus ISO 271 from a market perception on security posture? Okay, I can. So I've done a number of third-party security reviews for large financial organizations. And I look, so what this one organization does, it basically looks at the risk of a third party from the standpoint of handling confidential information. And it has tiers, and tier 1 and tier 2 are the highest level of PII and confidential information. And they require companies to either be SOC 2, type 2, it's not certified, audited, and you have a current audit, or ISO 27001 certified, okay? So when I do the evaluations against those, from a SOC 2 perspective, if they'll give it to me, I get the whole report. So I know what the controls are, they're described, and then they're kind of defined by the company a little bit. I mean, according to COVID, I believe, or maybe not COVID, yeah, I think it's COVID, but they're defined according to a framework and you pick them out. But typically, if I see one that only 60 pages, then I wonder if there are enough controls, usually around 120. And I can read the control, and they can say, examine the risk assessment and notice that 5 risks were identified as needing mitigation and saw that they mitigated and they were put them on our plan, or examine the pen test or something like that. So from the standpoint of auditing or looking at someone from a third party perspective, it does provide more information and more support to the responses that I'll ask in a questionnaire than ISO. However, either seems to be accepted. And in this organization I do some stuff for, they want to see that you have a valid certificate and they'll look at the scope, but we're not really going in and looking at the statement of applicability, which says which ones are applicable or not. So, so from a market perception of security posture, I think either of them are going to give you a leg up. But in terms of more scrutiny, I mean, right out of the box, SOX 2 gives you a little bit more, but you're out there and saying more about what your controls are. With ISO, it's more of the certificate. So hopefully that gives you some perspective. A SOC 2 is audited by a CPA firm. I've seen CPA firms kind of punt and let another firm work with them. You should be a CPA firm that's really doing this. Oh, okay. George sent some information about this too. Thank you. I have to look into that. Thank you, George. And that will help our friend from Ireland. How do we get an invite for the SEC presentation? So there's SEC guidance being done right now as a member of the Cybersecurity Collaborative. If you're interested in joining and want to hear about it, you can participate on the task force. We had 25 CISOs, and I just was on that for a few minutes before here. And we really talked about materiality, which is an issue, of an incident, how you define that. And we have some pretty good, sharp people that have had experience with it. And we talked about what you have to put in the 10K for response, and we have to show example information. So we don't know whether we're going to give a presentation like this on it, but if you want the documentation and output and participation from and advice from other members, you have to join. So if you're interested in joining, again, Tom Ward, just send a note to him. He'll do that. So the other one is TISAX, build on that for ISO certification. What some companies do is they do a crosswalk. So, and I'm not familiar with that one. I'm sorry, I'm not, again, in two cases. But usually with these, there's a series of controls. You simply do a crosswalk to the controls and reference the crosswalk in the statement of applicability, And then in the statement of applicability, you got to say it's applicable. But if you're using the TSAC tools and methods, you can refer to them, but you have to link them somehow, at least, to the controls. Now, I don't know what the management processes are, but I would definitely, not duplicate something. They don't want you to duplicate stuff. I mean, they don't want to see it be a waste of time. We're all about trying to strengthen our security program. But these are good questions. I'm sorry for both of these. We'll have to look at that. And I would say with both things, we can look at crosswalks in our teams that we're putting together as we're working together on these things. Thank you very much for I hope this was useful. There's a lot of information here. I don't know where people are coming from, but reach out to us if you have a question. Send it to Tom. He'll send it to me. Thank you for showing up, and again, growing up from Ireland and spending the time with us today and making it a very useful presentation for me. And all the best to you. We look forward, hopefully, to some of you joining us, and certainly send us some requests for more information. We'll help you out. Take care. Have a great day.